Hello and welcome. My name is Angie Holden and I'm the blogger behind the Country Chic Cottage. Today we're going to make a photo blanket with sublimation. So this is a photo panel blanket. So what this does is it makes it really easy even if you have a very small sublimation printer. So all the panels on the particular blanket I'm using use an 8.5 by 11 size sheet with the margins. So you can definitely print it on a printer that would only print up to 8.5 by 11. And then you just sublimate all the panels and make, it's a very large blanket, and make a very large blanket with this method. So I thought I would show you how to do this today. And I am going to sublimate this blanket and show you how to do this one in particular. Now, if you want to sublimate other blankets, you can sublimate any blanket that is 100% polyester. So if you don't like the look of this photo blanket, maybe you wanted to add, like a regular gray, say, blanket that's polyester, wanted to add something to the corner, name, monogram, what have you, you can do that as well. And I do have another video on it, and I used infusible ink in that video, but the same procedure would go for something sublimation that you would print from your sublimation printer. So I will link to that video below, so if you found this and you're looking for a sublimation blanket but not this big photo guy, then head there for that tutorial. But for now, let's see the supplies you'll need to make your own sublimation photo blanket. So I'm going to use heat-resistant tape, a lint roller, protective paper, heat-resistant gloves, and then I have sublimation prints and a paper cutter. So for my sublimation prints, I printed sublimation ink on sublimation paper using my Sawgrass sublimation printer, and I just printed them full size. And then I'm going to measure the squares of my blanket and use my paper cutter to trim them down. It's almost the full sheet size, but I want it to be exact, and I'll show you why later. So I went ahead and printed all the images that I need for my blanket. The blanket itself is pretty large. I can't get the entire thing on screen, but it looks something like this with white squares where I will sublimate each of my photos. Now, the measurements on Amazon are not the measurements that I got when I got my blanket. So what I would recommend is getting your blanket, laying it out flat, measuring in a few different places and a few different squares, the actual measurement. And then I'm going to make my prints slightly oversized, about 1/8 of an inch is all, not very much. This outside edge is black. However, if you get sublimation on it, you might see a line there. So I don't want to get too much sublimation on the black portion. If you would like to keep any sublimation from the black, you would cut your prints exact, or take like long strips of heat-resistant tape and put them right along that black edge, because your sublimation would not get on the tape. I'm going to try just adding my print being a little oversized because I think it will look fine on my finished product. But I'll show you kind of the results, and you can decide on your own which way you would like to do it. So you could cut them a little oversized or exact. However, bottom line, measure the actual blanket. Don't just use the measurements on Amazon and start printing, because my blanket was not the same measurements as Amazon. So now I'm going to trim some of my sublimation prints with my paper cutter just to show you how I do that. Each of my prints I'm actually making 8 by 10.5. So what I do is just trim off one side. So the white left on one side. Then just line this up with the 8 on the paper cutter, and we'll just trim off this other side. And so now it's 8 wide, and then I want it 10.5 long is what I'm using. So again, I'll just trim the white area off, say one side, flip it over, line it up with the 10.5, and trim off the other side. And so now I have a perfectly sized print for each of my squares. So I'm going to repeat for each of my photos. For each panel, you want to pre-press first. So pre-press the panel and make sure all the moisture is out of it. Now you will notice here that I've pulled out the pad that's usually my auto press. So I wanted kind of a firmer surface so that my blanket didn't distort as much when I pressed down on it. So I did use a firmer pad in the auto press itself. You could use something like this heat resistant mat. You could use a Nomex pad. If you're using another heat press that isn't the auto press, you'll probably be fine here. If you're using like something like an easy press, and on the easy press mat, I would probably not use the easy press mat and use something a bit firmer here. Once I pre-press, I go ahead and lint roll. Then add my sublimation print, being very careful to line it up exactly. And you will notice here I'm doing one panel at a time. So I'll do one panel, move the blanket, do another panel. Go ahead and add heat resistant tape to hold that into place and protective paper over the top, and then press. I'm doing 360 degrees for 60 seconds because that is what was recommended by the place where I purchased my blanket. Be sure to check with wherever you purchase your blanket and their recommendations. After the press is complete, you're going to want to remove your sublimation print, and then you're going to want to move the entire blanket to the next panel. You want to make sure that the panels you've already sublimated are hanging out of your press, and then repeat the same steps. So pre-press, lint roll, add your sublimation print, press at the full temperature for the full time, then remove the sublimation print, move your sublimation blanket, and just continue this way for each of the panels. It is easier if you have in your mind how you want to do each of the panels, so don't start maybe in the center of your blanket, but start on like the top left, move all the way across, then go to the next row is how I did mine. However, have a plan so that when you get to the end, you're not left with a piece that needs to go in your press that can't actually go in there because there's sublimation all the way around. So again, I picked a blanket where each of the panels fit in the heat press that I have. Now, I would recommend that for the best results. I find the best results in pressing one sublimation print one time, but making a larger blanket like this is super easy as long as you pick one where the panels are the right size for your printer as well as your heat press setup. I did want fewer tape marks, so I tried as little tape as possible. However, I found about 8 pieces of tape per panel helped to hold the image in place so I didn't have any white areas, and I will show you the white areas in a minute. So what I did was I lined it up on one corner, taped it down, went to the next corner, taped it down, and continued for all 4 corners. Now the blankets that I got, first of all, like this is fabric. It can stretch out, it's in your heat press, half of it is hanging off, half of it's in the floor. It can get like super stretchy. Some of the panels seem to be larger than the other ones. Some of them seemed to kind of stretch out of shape and I had to kind of pull them back into shape. So every single panel you have to take individually and locate your design. So these blankets do take a very long time to make. I did also find that I got better at locating my design the more I did. So by the end of the blanket, I got pretty good at locating the design. This blanket comes in a set of 2, so you could definitely do one as your test or your experiment and then do another. And the other thing I wanted to say is you definitely don't want to locate your print upside down. So I almost did that on one of my panels and that would have ruined the entire blanket. So be sure all of your photos are in the same orientation. So after I sublimated this blanket, I threw it in the washer and dryer just to see if the tape marks would come out. You can see them less after I've washed and dried it, and hopefully you can kind of see those. I think I have the light right where you can kind of see the tape marks. I tried 2 different brands of tape to see if it would happen with both of them. If you can see, like, these pieces of tape are after I removed them from the blanket, and you can see that half of it is black. So it's almost like the tape was kind of pulling off some of the black on the blanket. And it may just be like I got a super inexpensive blanket from Amazon and that might be the reason for that. So what I do like to do on just about everything is I just take my Easy Press Mini all the way up and I just sort of quickly run it over any areas where there's tape marks, and a lot of times I can get those where they're not as noticeable. So I will probably go over this entire blanket with my Mini. As long as you don't hold it in one place too long, it shouldn't like actually start sublimating again or anything. You could put a piece of protective paper if you wanted to. I often find that, you know, the blanket has a direction where everything lays. If you kind of mess that up a little bit, the tape mark won't be as noticeable. So I'm just gonna kind of run around my blanket like this on all the tape marks and see if I can get them to be basically less noticeable. And then let's take a look at the panels themselves. So some of them I did really, really good. So the size I made mine, like I said, it was about 1/8 inch more than I was measuring. However, once you press the blanket out, the squares kind of get a little bit bigger. So they ended up being basically exactly the size of my panels. So some of them, if I was off a little bit, I would get a white line. If you can see that white line there beside this photo. However, if you make them way oversized, and I don't know, in person you can see this, but I don't know if you're going to be able to see it on camera. If you make them way oversized, if you can see there's a black line through here, And that's where this photo went over into the black. So if you make them too large, you get black line. If you make them too small or don't locate them correctly, you kind of get a white line. So like I said, I got better at it as I went along. So I do think it is like a practice thing. Practice makes perfect. Some of the panels look really, really good. Like that panel, I think it's almost perfect. Like it really looks good. So I would say trial and error, maybe give yourself some grace for like the first 1 or 2 blankets, and then after that you'll probably get way better at sublimating these. All right, so now all that's left is to give this one as a gift, keep it for yourself, what have you, and you can get these in tons of different sizes. This is one size. I wanted a pretty large one and with tons of photo panels. However, you can like pick and choose from different sizes. Like I said, the quality, you might get what you pay for. I am gonna link the ones that I purchased. The blanket quality isn't horrible. However, it was like a lot of trial and error, and I have not used any other brands, so I cannot say if any of those would be any better. It was a lot of trial and error, like the squares seem to be different sizes, and like I said, the tape seemed to pull some of the black out, which was kind of inconvenient. So if you wanted to try like some other brands, you definitely could, or you could try the same brand I did. I do feel like this brand is really good for kind of learning your way around. It's inexpensive, comes in a 2-pack. Because this project really is some trial and error, deciding on, you know, what is the best method for you for sublimating these blankets. I do think that listing is really great for that. And then if you wanted to buy like a more expensive blanket after that, once you like really decide this is the best way for me to do these on my heat press, then I would welcome you to do that after you learn how to do it on some more inexpensive blankets like this one, which was my goal with this. Now, if you love this, you love the idea, but don't know what you're doing when it comes to sublimation and want to get your own sublimation printer, I have a course for that. So Sublimation Prep is open for enrollees right now, and I will leave a link to Sublimation Prep in the description below this video if you want to check out the course, what all you can learn, and join us now to learn all about how to do sublimation with a sublimation printer. So if you like this, you learned something, give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions about anything we've covered, drop down in the comment section, ask away. And if you haven't already, head on over to our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. We have videos just like this one every single week, and trust me, you don't want to miss any of those. So thank you all so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.